Minnesota. A little background story: I'm Tessa, and I'm 14. I live in Minnesota and go to this one campground up north, in the kind of middle of nowhere. I've been going to that campground for 11 years and still go there to this day. It had only been open for a year or two before I started going. My mom is really popular there, and we know everyone. They always have parties or stay up until 1 o'clock, drunk as heck. This particular night haunts me forever. My friend Chloe and I were best friends. She was the shy brunette, and I was the wild blonde. She never liked sleepovers, but that one night, we planned on having one in a tent outside her actual camper. Our parents didn't stay out late that night for some reason. We had a fire and did regular camping things. It was about 1 when we decided to go to the shower house, which was the only place with Wi-Fi since my data didn't work in the middle of nowhere. We planned on staying there until 3 a.m. At around 2 a.m., we needed chargers, so we went to her camper to grab them and stopped outside the door for some air. That's when we saw an old person, probably around 100 years old, walking what looked like a rat. I screamed, told Chloe what I saw, and we ran back inside. I started crying because I was so scared, and she was freaking out because she didn't know what was behind her. We hesitated to call our parents, afraid they'd be mad at us for being out so late. We weren't even supposed to be up past 1 that night. After an hour, we finally mustered the courage to open the door, fearing the creepy old man was still there. As we ran out, I saw him holding something that looked like a knife. To this day, we always remember that night. P.S. Our parents believed us and were mad at us for not calling them. By the way, I'm a huge fan and hope I get featured. With scouts. I was on camp and I hate camping, but as a leader so I had to. I had brought my laptop to entertain me when I got there. I set up the main tent when one of my friends named Anthony, the leader, came up and we were joking about when a gray blur ran across the field that made up our campsite. We both waited until every scout was there, said the rules, then began cooking our food. Now this was survival camp and the scout collected firewood and I lit the fire and we started cooking rabbit when one of the campers screamed. 2 bright eyes were staring out of a tree. Then I did a thing I regret. I yelled, "Good joke, now get the hell out of there." My friend said to calm down and aimed his flashlight at the tree, and we saw the gray blur again. After 1 more hour it was time to go to sleep, so we showed the scouts to their tents and moved to our own. I opened my laptop to get some work done when I heard a scream, where I ran outside and looked around and saw a group of scouts running towards me. I looked around and saw the bright eyes staring near their tent. I took the scout into the main tent and asked them what they saw, and one of them said, "We aren't sure." I asked for any details and they gave me one thing: it was gray. I woke up Anthony and we both walked out. We had garbed kitchen knives. Then we walked up and saw a large gray shape. "What the fuck are you playing at?" Anthony yelled, and it turned around. It was a large shape. It gave an inhuman screech before running off into the woods. The next day we told the camper to pack up their stuff and move out. When we were moving I saw a gray blur on the edge of the wood. I also got a question: does anyone know what the hell the gray thing was? I don't go camping anymore. It started as a normal camping trip for me. I was 13 at the time, and I was the loner of my life and enjoyed being alone and going on little trips into the woods and doing dome reading and other little things, and I did like to leave in the middle of the night and hid among the trees thinking I was a ninja or something like that, but I went out to play in the trees and I did have to come back because it was dark, and when everyone was asleep I snuck out to see the creek in the moonlight, and so I was walking there being I was supposed to be asleep and I wasn't very bright, and realizing I had no idea where I was I stopped and heard crunching behind me. I looked and saw a mountain lion inching a good 30 feet to my left side. Away I stumbled and stripes spurting. I noticed it heard me fall and stared at me, then I screaming and jumped and ran, not knowing if it's following. I ran to a small graveyard and fell over a tomb to feel an ice cold hand grab me rough by the wrist. Was true horror, and then I was yanked to my feet, and I was pulled, and the mountain lion jumped out of the trees and headed for me, and still being pulled I was yanked all the way back to camp and fell about 15 feet from the fire, and when I heard my rescuer yell, "You stupid ass motherfucker!" And I look up, "I love you too, Beth," realizing it was my older sister. She had been trailing me like she does when I left, and had noticed someone in the graveyard, and not the animals, but a large man figure in a hood walking my way fast, and jumped, and so if it were not for my sister, I would not be alive, even if she doesn't know how much she saved me from. Then she looked into my eyes and said not a word about this to Mom. I shook my head knowing we would never tell anyone of our trip into the woods, that horrible camping trip. Kill me if you can, hunting. It's an avid hobby of mine, and runs in the family. My favorite animals to catch are deer and boars, as they are quite a challenge to catch, and I love a challenge. As well as general hunting, camping in the woods is therapeutic for me, as you're in nature's natural habitat, which can be greatly enjoyed when by yourself. Accompanying this is the type of people you meet whilst hiking. I've met people who shared their food and campfire with me, and some even hiked with me in the gorgeous wilderness we call the woods. But most of the time it's your animal friends who accompany you whilst walking and camping. I wish this story was about all of the above, but things took a plummet for the worse. And this is my story. I had recently completed an assignment which I would like to describe as long-winded and quite boring, even though it was my favorite topic, human biology. Due to this, I decided to take a 5-day hike across a vast stretch of woods, brilliant for hunting apparently. As a hunting enthusiast, I decided to hunt for some deer and possibly some boars if I came across any. So I prepped up my water filter, packed my tranquilizer and hunting equipment as well as my pop-up tent and some snacks high in energy, and took the 3.5-hour drive to my destination. I was stoked and excited, as I loved camping and hunting, as I could unwind around nature and overall enjoy the set atmosphere the woods provided. After what seemed like days behind the wheel, I arrived at what looked like an abandoned parking lot at 3:30 p.m., as all the bays were empty, and the ranger's office looked as if it hadn't been occupied for years. But I brushed it off, parked up and began my hike. The place gave me a very uneasy vibe, as if the woods beyond the ranger's office was sinister, in a way. I can't really describe what gave me this uneasiness, but I honestly chalked it up to the place looking abandoned and creepy. Either way, I headed out onto the path and began scouting the area for animals. I've got to be honest, this set of woods was exquisite. The sun was shining through the trees, and the animals were up and active, and I came across a few deer, but no boars unfortunately. Fast forward to 8:30 p.m., it was uneventful to be honest, and it was getting pretty dark and gloomy now as it's mid-November. Now, I need to add that I'm quite a paranoid guy, as I was burgled at the age of 15, and all was okay in the end, but that paranoia of something or someone lurking in the shadows stays with me in the back of my mind when I'm out alone at night. Anyway, excuse the babbling. I then whipped up a fire, cooked up some marshmallows and warmed up some beans, and ate away, minding my own business. After this, I decided to go for a late-night hunt, as I did a 2-week course on how to hunt prey in the woods when it's dark, and I think it really paid off. 15 minutes later I put the fire out as I was prepared to go on a late-night hunt, but then my blood ran as cold as ice and my hands started to shake when I saw a silhouette of a person about 100 m away from me. It was unexpected, so I internally freaked the fuck out. As well as this, I noticed a small pocket knife in their left hand, and it looked like they were crouching and stalking something, as they had their knife at the ready. I believe it was a man, about 6 foot tall, and his back was facing me, so I believe that he didn't notice I was there, which I took as a godsend. However, it could just be another hunter, like myself. After shooting bricks whilst watching this man for 5 minutes, he disappeared into the inky night, and I got over it pretty quickly as I thought he was a fellow hunter like myself. I honestly wish that that was the case. Fast forward 1 hour, and it's around 9:45 p.m. and I'm feeling confident enough to go back out into the black wilderness and catch a deer or two, or maybe even a boar. I pinpointed where my tent was with a map and went on my way with my hunting equipment. 10 minutes later, I'm practically in no man's land, as everywhere around me was pitch black, but I knew what I was doing. I was stalking a deer, which hadn't noticed me, and was about 50 meters in front of me, plodding around the eerie woods. I grabbed my tranquilizer and placed the deer in my sights. That was when I heard twigs snap. My eyes darted, my legs went into jelly mode, and I jerked my neck to the source of the noise. What the fuck? A fucking silhouette appeared out of the tree to the left of me, about 50 yards away, and just watched me, not the deer, but me. The deer was long gone now, so it was just me and an unwanted guest. His size concluded to me that he was the same guy as before, 6 feet, roughly 200 lbs. He stared at me, and I stared back, my body still as stone, but my sudden outburst of adrenaline was making me shake. I couldn't see his face, as it was too dark. Fuck, was he a late-night human butcher? Am I not going to see daylight again? I just about choked out. Who's there? I tried to say in the calmest voice I could do, but fear was evident when I asked the question. The man raised the hand with his pocket knife and pointed his index finger towards me. That was it. I fucking bolted it north, whilst mildly tripping up and hitting my head off tree branches. Twigs snapped rapidly behind me, as this son of a bitch was chasing me. I looked back once and saw his vacant right hand brushing tree branches to the side of him. His knife gripped tightly in his left hand. I then realized that during it all, I dropped my tranquilizer. Fuck that shit, I can buy another one. I know, I should have shot the guy, but it's amazing what one can forget when in a horrific situation, even if it's a gun. I wasn't going back for it. A ton of thoughts were going through my mind whilst I was fleeing. Why me? What does he want? Money? My food? What could it fucking be? That was when I honestly thought I pissed myself, as he then said in a rapid tone. Isn't this fun? He then had the goddamn audacity to start laughing in a patronizing way, and I couldn't take it anymore. I sped up, and I'll tell you now, it's amazing what the human body can do when adrenaline and natural instinct takes over. I never ran so fast in my life. I made a hard right, dived into some bushes nearby quietly, and eventually lost the guy. I heard his footsteps go the opposite way, and it turns out that I went in a huge circle, as I could see my tent, only 50 meters from me now. I was fucking shaking, and tears were starting to form, but I had to stay strong, I just had to. What would my father do in this situation? I tuned my ears into the inky darkness, and heard nothing, and I saw nothing. I was not going to turn on my phone torch, as I'd be an open target. I checked my watch, and it was now 10:30 p.m. I'd been in the tent for 10 minutes now. I sat still in my tent, listening to every small noise I could hear in the woods. Snap, I held in my gasp, as I heard a twig snap behind the tent. And with that accompanied a low and sinister voice. You think you could run? I win. With that, my tent was being sliced open and the fucker popped head in. He was fucking licking his lips and his wide eyes locked with my eyes. "You lose!" he screams as he pulls the knife out. Fighting. Not my strong point, but the gym made me a pretty strong guy. So as he tried to stab me, I grabbed both his arms and fended him off from plunging a blade into my torso. I tried to disarm the fucker, and he laughed during the process. I thought he was trying to intimidate me, however I was ready to kill. Not a deer, not a boar, but a human. I restrained his left wrist, but his knife was inches away from going into my foot, so I stepped onto his right hand, pulled back on his left wrist. Then, snap! His left wrist snapped, and he let out a blood-curdling scream. I had the upper hand and fucking took advantage of this. I got the knife from his distorted, shattered hand and gave him a taste of his own fucking medicine. I sunk the knife into his right hand, and he screamed. I lay a few punches and I think I popped his nose, but I had no regrets. I grabbed my arm in pain, as he made me bend it in an awkward position when he was on top of me when he first ripped the tent open. But I honestly couldn't care about my injuries. He tried to kick me, but I punched him in the face until he was unconscious. I checked my phone, and I had no phone service. Fuck, I panted. I picked up this fucker into a fireman's lift, and I remembered my way to the ranger's office as it was exactly west from my tent. After an hour of struggling with a killer on my shoulders out cold, I found the ranger's station, and to my surprise, a young man, around 20, was there. I collapsed to my knees as I explained the situation. As it turns out, the guy slashed my left bicep, but the adrenaline numbed out the pain. So when it wore off, I suddenly was in pain and noticed the laceration. The ranger called for backup, and they eventually arrived. I don't know how long it took. Fuck my belongings, I was not going to go back out there to retrieve them. The ranger offered to drive me to the nearest hospital in my car, and I did. The night stalker was taken away, but was semi-conscious. The next day, I woke up in a hospital bed to an officer. And what he said next was burned into my memory, never to be erased. When I first saw the killer, his back was towards me, knife in his left hand, and was crouching as I mentioned earlier. It turns out that he was stalking another hiker, who he brutally murdered and mutilated at the scene. They found chloroform at the scene, hence me not hearing any screams or cries for help. I vowed from there onwards to never go hunting again by myself. The next time I went hunting was half a year after this incident, with 4 other mates. And although the woods has a beautiful atmosphere and vibe, never judge a book by its cover, as the tables can turn within the blink of an eye. For all of you going camping and hunting, stay safe. And remember, don't think that these things can happen to you. When I was a kid, we found a body in the woods. Okay, well, to start this off, I grew up in the 1970s in a small town in North Carolina. It was almost too small to be called a town, with only a school and a couple of small shops. I'm guessing you can imagine how boring it would be to be a teenager there, and it would have been if it wasn't for the woods. The neighborhood that I lived in backed up onto a big forest that spread out for about 3 miles. And it's where I spent most of my teenage years with my 2 best friends, Levi Gibson and Connor Lechance. They both were in my class at school, and we were all 15. Levi lived across the street. He was smart and kinda quiet, unlike Connor, who lived down at the bad side of the neighborhood. Connor was a troublemaker, getting sent to the dean's office at least once a week. He was loud, obnoxious, and a natural leader, always finding something for us to do, legal or not. When he was around, we were never bored. It was the beginning of the summer holidays, and Levi had called for me. We went down to get Connor, who was messing around with his younger brother's scooter in the front yard, and we asked him if he wanted to go into the woods. He said yes. Now, just in case this may be necessary, Connor had almost black shaggy hair and the most beautiful eyes. One was light blue, while the other was brownish. He always wore scruffy red Converse shoes and a denim jacket. And of course, I had the biggest crush on him. While Levi had styled brown hair, brown eyes, and freckles, he was considerably shorter than me. And then there was me, a red-headed brown-eyed girl that quite a lot of people were scared of due to my hyperness. I was always ready to go somewhere or do something, and I was always talking about something. Anyway, we made our way into the woods and started walking in a random direction. We did this for fun, as it meant we would usually get lost and have to find our way back, which most of the time just led to us being late for dinner and getting sent to our beds early, or worse, getting grounded. But we did it anyway. We were making our way along a deer trail that I didn't think we had ever been on before when Connor found a pile of shit, and, of course, dipped a stick into it, and began chasing us with it. Levi and I, of course, freaked out and scattered, either of us wanting to be smeared with shit. I ran off, and luckily for me, Connor followed Levi instead in the opposite direction. After a while of them not coming back, I began to think they had left me, and I was furious. I was walking down the way I had seen them run when suddenly something stuck out of the bush and grabbed me. I let out a surprised yelp, and Connor shushed me, only for me to shout at him for scaring me. But when I saw the look on his face, I decided that I shouldn't be talking, and I shut my mouth. Connor whispered to me, "You have got to see this," and began to lead me through the bushes. The further we went, the more I could smell something disgusting. Finally, we came upon an almost green Levi staring at the ground with a weird expression on his face. I was about to ask him what was wrong, but Connor tugged me past him a few feet away, where there was a ditch, and in that ditch was what I could only describe as something out of a nightmare. It was a body, it was a purple-blue color, and it almost looked swollen up. The stench was now terrible, and I had to cover my mouth with my jumper so as not to gag. I backed up to where Levi was. Connor stood looking into the trench for about 5 more seconds before he walked back over to us. "Cool, huh?" he said with a grin. Levi gave him a disgusted look before saying, "No, it ain't cool. We need to go home and call the police." "What, why?" "What do you mean, why?" "There is a body dumped in the woods, Connor. It's clearly been murdered." "No, man, it's so cool we cannot get the police. If we do, they are gonna think it was us who killed her." "Why would they think it was us?" "Because that's what the police do, man." "Don't be stupid, Connor. You can't stop me." "For fuck's sake, man, if you get the police out here, it will be on the news. Everyone will get questioned. They will probably put out a curfew and ban us from going into the forest. There will be police everywhere, and the summer will suck." I had just been quietly watching the argument take place, not really caring what happened, but that got to me, and there was no way in hell that I was going to let my summer get ruined. Connor's right. "What? P, you're not serious." "Levi, we have the whole summer left. Do you really want to spend it inside?" "Yeah, man, 2 against 1. Come on, don't do anything stupid." Levi looked crushed. "Fine, but I'm not coming near this thing again." Connor let out a whoop of joy, and we had made our way home, listening to him talk about how it would be our secret. Well, the secret didn't last very long. By the end of the week, Connor had shown all the rest of our friends, and it was a miracle that nobody did call the police. But I guess that just shows how close everybody was. We were like one big family, and like most families, we had our secrets. The body remained there for the rest of the summer. I only went up a few more times, and it had gotten less interesting each time, and according to Connor, there were only bones left. Anyway, on the last week of summer vacation, we decided to have a big campout with all of our friends. There was me, Levi, Connor, Josh Walsh, a loud-mouthed boy with mousy brown hair and blue eyes, Alice Haley, a quiet girl with straight brown hair cut into a neat bob, Courtney Ray, who I would describe as the only girl I actually saw as a friend, probably because she was the only one who put up with my bratty attitude. She had long dark brown, almost black hair, and brown eyes, and also had freckles dotting her cheeks. And then there was Kenny Stokes, the kid whose garden we were camping in. He had sandy blonde hair, brown eyes, and freckles. His dad owned the biggest garden, so of course, we had to camp there. As an added bonus, Kenny's garden backed right onto the woods. And even though we had promised Kenny's mom that we wouldn't go into the woods after dark, we were planning to. But unfortunately, our plans were foiled by good old Mother Nature, as she had decided to make it rain. So all 7 of us piled into the biggest tent, which belonged to Courtney, and played cards for about 2 hours, making up new games with crazy rules. Josh even suggested that we play strip poker, only to have a shoe chucked at him, and to be told that if he carried on acting like a pedo, we would send him home. He quieted down after that, and we carried on playing until Kenny began complaining that we were gonna run out of oxygen. This went on for a good 10 minutes before he decided to unzip the tent and stick his head out so he could breathe. "Hey guys, the rain stopped," said Kenny excitedly. "Seriously?" I said. "Yeah, let's go do something." We then all argued for a good 20 minutes about where we were gonna go and what we were gonna do, and so far, breaking into our school and hanging out there was winning. That was until Connor said, "Why don't we go see the body?" That was it. Everyone put on their shoes and coats, and Kenny took down his dollar store flashlight that he had hung from the roof of Courtney's tent, and off we went. Connor and Kenny led the way, but Kenny's flashlight, to be honest, was pretty shit and didn't light the way very well. And I don't believe that we needed it anyway, because even though I hadn't been to the body in weeks, it was burned into my mind how to get there. The whole way there, we were talking about what it would look like now and how creepy this all was. And then the conversation took a turn that it never had before. We began talking about who we thought the body was, why they were dead, and who murdered them. And this scared me because it made me see it for what it really was, a dead body of a murdered person hidden by someone in the woods. And we had never reported it. I brought this issue up to Connor, who simply stated, "It's too late now. It's probably only bones left, and even if we did tell the police, we would get in trouble for holding off for so long." To this, I remained silent and kept walking alongside Courtney and Levi, listening to Josh telling Alice some bullshit story behind us. They soon went silent though, as we came to the ditch. Connor and Kenny stood silently at the edge, shining the flashlight into it. Kenny's mouth was agape in horror. I asked what it was, and Connor shushed me and beckoned the rest of us over with his finger. As I came to the edge, I saw what they had freaked out about. In the ditch was something piled on top of the original body. It was wrapped in a yellow floral-patterned bedsheet, and was tied with some sort of string to stop the sheet from coming away. Everyone stood silent for what felt like hours, but in reality was probably only a couple of seconds before Connor pulled his Stanley knife out of his pocket and descended into the ditch. Levi began to protest, but Connor turned and shushed him and whispered for Kenny to shine his light on him, to which Kenny obeyed. Connor then cut some of the string and pulled at the sheet until it revealed the face of a young girl. She stared up at us with dead, glazed-over eyes and a blank expression. I felt like I was going to be sick, and apparently so did Levi as he began to violently retch, and he turned away. I couldn't turn away, no matter how hard I tried. I was mesmerized. Connor suddenly jumped back. A look of sudden realization and horror crossed his pale face as he began to scramble up the side of the ditch. Josh helped him up, and a chorus of "What happened?" and "What is it?" began, only to have him frantically shush us. With a shaking voice, he said, "It's dry as a bone." A feeling of absolute dread settled in my stomach. If you don't get what the big deal was, It had rained only an hour earlier, everything was wet, and this body was dry, which means that it had to have been put there recently. Everyone was silent. Then there was a noise behind us, across the ditch. My heart was in my throat as we turned around, and Kenny quickly pointed his flashlight at where the noise was coming from, and then clicked suddenly. From across the ditch came an extremely bright light, illuminating us and making the person holding the light impossible to see. "Run!" yelled Connor, grabbing me by the arm, and everyone sprinted. And whoever it was with the light sprinted too, their lights swinging violently as they ran, randomly illuminating trees and bushes and scaring the shit out of some deer. And then suddenly it went off. I felt my heart stop, and Connor was muttering, "Shit! Shit! Fuck, where is he?" under his breath as we ran for our lives. I tried listening to hear if whoever it was behind us, but all I could hear was my pulse racing. Everything was beginning to go blurry as we crashed through the tree line and into Kenny's backyard, to be greeted by Kenny and Courtney. Levi stumbled in a couple of seconds later, his face streaked with tears of fear, followed by Josh. We huddled together, and everyone began blabbering about what the fuck was going on and who was that, and what do we do if he finds us. But then Courtney spoke up. "Where's Alice?" Everyone went silent and looked toward the woods in fear until Levi spoke up. "Kenny, go get your dad." Connor looked over to glare at Levi before turning to Kenny and barking. "No, Kenny, don't get your dad. Let's think about this, okay?" "What the fuck do you mean, think about this?" "He will call the police, and do you think the police are gonna believe us?" "Yes." "No, they fucking won't. Look, we are gonna wait for 5 minutes, and then we can get your dad." And for some reason, we waited. 5 minutes soon turned into 15 minutes, and then Connor reluctantly turned around to us and let out a defeated sigh. "Kenny, go get your dad, but you tell him that we were playing tag, and she ran into the woods so she wouldn't get caught, okay?" "Right." Now, Kenny's dad was a terrifying man. He was 6 feet tall and built like a tank. He was also an ex-Marine. So Kenny began pounding on his back door, and this went on for about a minute before Mr. Stokes threw open the door, his face red with fury. "What the fuck are you playing at, boy? It's 2 in the goddamn morning!" he hollered. "Dad, Alice is in the woods." "What?" "She ran in when we were playing tag, and she hasn't come back out. We think she's gotten lost." Mr. Stokes stared off into the woods for a bit, squinting, trying to see beyond the tree line before muttering an okay and retreating into his house, only to return 5 minutes later with a big flashlight. He stomped off into the woods. We all waited for about 20 minutes before he returned and said, "Fun's over, kids. Go home and get your fathers and tell them to bring flashlights." And that was it. We all went home and told our parents what was going on, and all the men went out into the woods to look for Alice, while the women stood around in Kenny's backyard. We were all told to stay at home, which I didn't. I crossed the street and knocked on Levi's door. He answered, and I stepped inside, and apparently, Connor had the same idea as he was sitting on the sofa in Levi's living room eating some chips. "Do you think they will find her?" I asked quietly. "Yeah, she's probably just panicked and got herself lost," said Connor. "And what if he got her? What if she's dead? What are you gonna do then?" said Levi as he stood by the window, looking into the dark street. "Then we keep to our stories the same. She ran off into the woods and didn't come out. That's all you say." Suddenly the sound of police sirens cut through the air. "Oh no," mumbled Levi as the police cars drove down the road to Kenny's house. We watched as 2 police cars pulled up, and the men got out, carrying big flashlights, and they walked around back and into the woods. After that, me and Kenny went home, and I watched out my window as suddenly 5 more police cars appeared. My parents came home at around 6. I asked my mother what happened, and she told me that they found a body in the woods and that it wasn't looking good. The next day, the police interviewed all of us, and we stuck to Connor's story. They didn't find Alice. And just like he said it would be, there was news coverage, a ban on us going into the woods, and there was a curfew for 9 p.m. When we went back to school, there was an assembly on safety with strangers. They found Alice in the end, 12 days later, chopped up into little pieces and crammed into a garbage can on the side of the road 10 miles from her house. I have my own kids now and have since lost contact with all of my childhood friends, apart from Levi, whom I now have a child with. He recently told me that Kenny had been killed due to an overdose, and we were invited to the funeral, along with the rest of the kids I grew up with. I will not be attending that funeral,